The verdict is in fact in, and the verdict is clear. As shown by this group of scientific organizations that signed a letter supporting our efforts to do something about carbon pollution in the Senate back in October of 2009. Virtually every significant scientific organization accepts that these are the facts and that the verdict is in. And indeed, there's some recent added support. The scientific community continues to examine this question, and a recent report by James Hansen and Makiko Sato says climate change is likely to be the predominant scientific, economic, political, and moral issue of the 21st century. The fate of humanity and nature may depend upon early recognition and understanding of human-made effects on Earth's climate. They continue, Earth is poised to experience strong amplifying polar feedbacks in response to moderate global warming. Thus, goals to limit human-made warming to 2 degrees Celsius are not sufficient. They are prescriptions for disaster.
Part of the reason that it's difficult to get the policies that are needed is that the public has been misinformed to some degree by special interests. It's somewhat analogous to the way that tobacco manufacturers dealt with the lung cancer problem. They pretended that it wasn't really a problem, and they would pay those scientists who thought that it wasn't a problem to speak out. In the case of climate change, there have been documented with some of the major energy companies have paid for advertisements and scientists saying that there's not really a problem. I'm trying to draw attention to that because, you know, these CEOs are human beings who have children and grandchildren. So I want them to think about this. That's why I said I think they're committing a crime against humanity, because they could cause the response to be delayed by decades, and we could pass tipping points with grave consequences. So I just want them to think about that.
The United Nations Conference came out, the IPCC, with its most recent report, which now provides a smoking gun as if you needed one with respect to man-made, human-made impact on global climate change. The Earth is warmer today than it's ever been in recent modern history, certainly in the last thousands of years. And we know to a certainty what the impacts are. Just last week, I met with the top scientists of our nation, and they told me of the most recent indicators that we're seeing. Increases in the floods, increases in wildfires. We see ice melting at a stunning rate in the Arctic, in the Antarctic, in Alaska. So many of you here from Alaska. We see the permafrost melting. And Russian scientists now tell us that hidden in the hydrates of the tundra and in the underneath the sea with respect to the melting of the permafrost are some 4 billion tons of methane. If that methane is released as the permafrost continues to melt, you have 20 to 30 times the damage that you have from CO2. The damage that we already have from CO2 that's already in the atmosphere, no matter what we do, is guaranteed to increase the temperature by yet another 0.7, 0.8 degrees Celsius. And doing what we do to prevent global climate change and stop it, in the 10-year window that Jim Hansen, the leading climatologist at NASA, has given us, 10 years, that's the time we have to demand change. We need to have an economy-wide cap and encourage efficiencies and alternative and renewable energy all across this nation. That is the imperative.
We've subsidized oil companies for a century. That's long enough. It's time to end the taxpayer giveaways to an industry that rarely has been more profitable and double down on a clean energy industry that never has been more promising. pass clean energy tax credits, create these jobs. You'd think that everybody would be supportive of solar power. That's what you'd think. There won't be any more public investment in solar energy. There won't be as many new jobs and new businesses. Some of these folks want to dismiss the promise of solar power and wind power and fuel-efficient cars. In fact, they make jokes about it. I mean, think about that mindset, that attitude that says because something is new, it must not be real. You know, if these guys were around when Columbus set sail, they'd be charter members of the Flat Earth Society. Not only because it's flat, transmission lines were already here, the sun is traveling, and there's no haze, and it's absolutely clear. And so this is an extraordinary opportunity for the community.
About solar. We talk about cost competitiveness, but the one thing we fail to talk about is those costs that you don't see on the bottom line. That is, coal makes us sick. Oil makes us sick. It's global warming. It's ruining our country. It's ruining our world. We've got to stop using fossil fuel. We have, for generations, taken it out of the earth, carbon out of the earth, and put it in the atmosphere. And it's making us all sick. It's changing our world.
I think the biggest myth about the climate change challenge is that responding to it is just going to be cost, cost, cost. In fact, responding to the climate change challenge is going to be benefit, benefit, benefit. What's going to happen is, number one, we're going to reduce the magnitude of the damages that we and the rest of the world suffer from climate change. Number two, we're going to improve the air quality in our cities. Number three, we're going to preserve our forests as havens for biodiversity. And number four, we're going to unleash a wave of technological innovation that's going to create new technologies, new businesses, new jobs, and new growth. This is a win-win-win-win situation if we deal with it. If we don't deal with it, it's going to be lose-lose. We will be cooked. I don't know why this should be so difficult to sell to the voters. It is my continuing impression that scientists are held in higher regard today, as they have been over decades, by the American public than virtually any other group. Whether we've lost a few points or gained a few points, in the last year or so, I can't be sure because I don't follow it that closely, but I do know that science and scientists continue to be held in high regard, except perhaps by the faction who don't believe in climate science. Some time ago about this, I was trying to console the president that the public support for the view that climate is changing and humans are causing it fell a few points during the uproar over the stolen emails from the University of East Anglia and the uproar over a couple of mistakes.
Global warming itself is a misnomer and indeed a dangerous misnomer. We should therefore not be calling it global warming at all. It was indeed, I think, a strategic mistake to call it global warming. We should be calling it global climate disruption, even though that's a larger mouthful than global warming.
So this is a good place for me to maybe just spend a little time talking about energy and climate change. First of all, we just got 5 feet of snow in Washington, and so everybody's like, a lot of the people who are opponents of climate change, they say, "See, look at that! There's all this snow on the ground. This doesn't mean anything." I want to just be clear that the science of climate change doesn't mean that every place is getting warmer. It means the planet as a whole is getting warmer. But what it may mean is, for example, Vancouver, which is supposed to be getting snow to the Olympics, suddenly is at 55 degrees, and Dallas suddenly is getting 7 inches of snow. What the idea is that as the planet as a whole gets warmer, you start seeing changing weather patterns, and that creates more violent storm systems, more unpredictable weather. So any single place might end up being warmer. Another place might end up being a little bit cooler. There might end up being more precipitation in the air, more monsoons, more hurricanes, more tornadoes, more drought in some places, floods in other places. So that's one aspect of the science that I think everybody should understand.
The small particles were in the atmosphere because we would have realized much earlier that how strong the greenhouse effect is, and would have had more time to make the adjustments that are going to be necessary to slow down and eventually stop the growth of greenhouse gases. I think we have less than a decade to avoid passing what I call a point of no return. I think we have to keep global warming less than 1 degree Celsius, or we're going to get very bad effects. And the problem is that to keep the warming less than 1 degree Celsius, we have to level off the emissions and get them to decline before the middle of the century substantially. Right now, the course that we're on is plus 2% per year in greenhouse gas emissions. Well, if you continue that even for 15 years, it's a 35% increase, and then there's no way that you could possibly meet this alternative scenario with warming less than 1 degree Celsius.
There are going to be those who make cynical claims that contradict the overwhelming scientific evidence when it comes to climate change. Claims whose only purpose is to defeat or delay the change that we know is necessary. So we're going to have to work on those folks.